Hi guys, hold on for a second. Before we proceed to the video, I have something very important to tell you. Professor John Vicofus has published his new book in collaboration with Little French Media, and the title of the book is Neoliberalism, Inequality, and Authoritarianism. This book details how neoliberalism impacts the geopolitical economy in the 21st century. You can buy it from Amazon and the link is in the description. Thank you. Now let's proceed to the video.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I just want to introduce everyone to a video that deals with a transition of a great power like the British Empire to the United States and from the United States to China. This is a vast topic, and one is reminded, especially someone like me who uh, taught history in higher education for decades, of the great Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of Rome, of the Roman Empire, which is a multi-volume work. It really takes many volumes to cover a vast topic like the dynamics of the transition from one great power to the other, from England to the United States to China, because there are very many complex factors that enter into this. What I do in this full-length video, which I like all of you to watch, is I look at the common characteristics that account for the ascendancy of great power like England in the long 15th century, coinciding with the rise of capitalism. I compare that with the rise of the United States to globalism from the in the late 19th century, after the end of the Civil War, when the U.S. rapidly industrializes. There's a westward expansion where there's complete integration of the land and rapid infrastructural development, and of course, building a huge navy in order to prepare to compete with the Europeans and the Japanese for colonies and markets on a world scale, beginning, of course, with the Spanish-American War, which was the U.S. considered, and still does, the Western Hemisphere is its own domain, as promulgated in as the Monroe Doctrine, which was promulgated in 1823, stated that the United States considered itself hegemonic in this hemisphere, and it still does, by the way. The question of transition from one great power to another, playing the dominant role in world affairs, is indeed very complex, and there are many factors that go into this, and I do analyze those in the full video, in the long video. However, there are some common elements. Empires from ancient times, by the way, before there were nation states, roughly 600 years ago in the 15th century to the present, coinciding with the rise of capitalism, there were cities, there were tribes, city states, and there were empires. And of course, empires from the Babylonian Empire, the earliest empire, the Egyptian Empire, the Athenian empires in India and China, from the earliest empires to medieval empires like the Carolingian Empire, for example, uh, to more modern ones like the British Empire, followed by the imperial hegemony of the United States. All of these have several things in common. One of those things is the policy goals. The policy goals are to expand territorially, to acquire riches, and of course, along with that, glory. And to do that, military is an integral component of that. Now, the studies that have been done, especially in the post World War II period, and especially in the last 40 years or so, about the connection between the tools of empire, namely the military, and the ascendancy of an empire as well as its decline, indicate that while the military does in fact serve on the silver platter, has in fact served that on a silver platter, imperial ambitions, it also is a fact throughout history that the uh, military siphons off, it absorbs precious resources from the economy. And here is an inexorable link between the economy and the military. Throughout history, a country that does not have sustainable economic viability, growth, steady growth for the duration, and simply spends inordinately on defense, finds itself eventually bankrupt, and it declines and falls. This is true from the Persians to the Roman Empire to the British Empire and currently the United States. Now, the rise of an empire is relative to the decline of its rivals and friends. And so the fact is, for example, let's just take something that is more familiar to people than any other, namely the United States. The United States was at the zenith of its power in 1945, precisely because the rest of the world hit rock bottom. It's very simple. So the highest position of the United States in terms of power, this doesn't mean, by the way, that the US didn't get stronger, because when I've made this point before and in conferences, and people go, wait a minute, we actually had more technology and the GDP, greater GDP. Yes, all that's true. And better, bigger, and better weapons. All of it is true. However, it is during the Truman administration that the US experienced the zenith of its power. After that, it was on the way down because countries around the world, right at the end of World War II, had hit rock bottom, and they only had nowhere to go but up, and that's exactly what happened. And a number of them, with the assistance of the United States, whether it was Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, or Europe under the Marshall Plan, by the way, that's true, but they did begin to recover, and they began to, relative to the United States, began to compete and challenge that hegemony, albeit as junior partners, not to mention the rivals like the Soviet Union and China. Now, in this long video, I talk about the common elements of the United States as an imperial power, Pax-Americana, and compare Pax-Americana to Pax-Britannica, the British Empire, which was long lasting, of course, much longer than the US, and the common elements in their ascendancy to globalism, to being global powers, and their um, fixation with defense, and compare that to how, as well as, by the way, one other point, as well as their imperial networks on a world scale, and I compare that with the rise of China in the last, let's say, 40, 45 years or so, which was absent of that. The Chinese did not have an imperial network. They did not rise as a result of an imperial network. They did not rise as a result of resting on the defense sector as leverage. So we compare all of this. Again, it's from an overview in the long video. It's from an overview perspective because I honestly believe, as a historian who thoroughly enjoyed, of course, Edward Gibbon's work on the fall of Rome, the decline and fall of Rome, that you do need to spend, a researcher needs to spend many volumes to unravel all of this. However, there are some things that we can summarize and try to make sense of, especially at this point in our history, with a Trump administration coming into office in the White House in the United States, and immediately announcing, even before setting foot in the White House, that there will be an even more intense economic warfare, uh, tariffs, sanctions, all sorts of mechanisms to block China from continuing its rise to globalism, its ascendancy to being a hegemonic, an economic hegemonic power. Now, one last thing, because I don't want to, you can watch the long video on this and get more information. But one other thing, and that is that powers that decline, let's take, for example, the British Empire, do not necessarily fade in the background. The Great Britain today, the United Kingdom today, is still a great power. It's not a superpower. It's a great power. It plays a role. It plays a secondary role. It plays second fiddle to the United States, but it plays a role in the world arena. It has nuclear weapons. It has a very strong economy. It has a role to play. Okay. Similarly, the transition doesn't mean that a great power goes from that status down to some third world vision of non-entity as a global player. By the way, it doesn't work like that because of the complex alliances and alignment systems, from military networks, defense networks, to trade agreements. So the alliances play a role because a great power is then part of a bloc group. However, we look at China and we look at the different approach that China has adopted to rise to the level of dominant economic power. Believe me, by the way, we'll talk more about this. I do talk more about this in the longer video, that China is the undisputed economic power of the world, no matter the nominal value of the US GDP, because when you take into account the purchasing power parity value, the US is way behind China in that regard. And purchasing power parity, I'm sorry to say, for those enthusiasts who maintain this myth about nominal value, purchasing power parity is really what matters, because it means That the paper, it has no intrinsic value. It's what you buy with it. Anyway, now one again, I want to invite all of you to watch this video, to write comments, ask questions, and by all means, subscribe to this channel, which my very good friend Asad Alim manages. I thank you very much for watching. Thank you.